X-Trial Barcelona is the 5th event of the 2018 X-Trial FIM World Championship calendar as we move into the second half of the campaign and the last round before the mid-season break. For the first time this season, the riders leave France and head to the sport's heartland in Catalonia, a home race for no less than 5 of the night's competitors. Last time out, the riders headed to Strasbourg to put an end to a 4-round Tour of France and mark the mid-season point of the 2018 X-Trial campaign with the first X-Trial Strasbourg since 2012. For a second successive event, James Dable was the lone permanent rider eliminated in the opening round of heats. A total of 4 failed sections, leaving him 7th and above only wildcard riders Franz Kadlec and Jack Price in the overall standings. Each of the 5 Spaniards progressed to round 2 and 3 of them met in heat 1. Jaime Busto failed 4 of the 6 sections, but it was the 4th with a single mark dab that cost him most, each of the other 5 competitors making it through clean. Busto was pipped by just a single mark by Gironi Fajardo, who suffered a disastrous start to the lap with 3 failed sections, was even forced into swapping machines after suffering a puncture. But the veteran fought back well and became the first rider through section 5 to take 5th. Benoit Bincaz bettered Fajardo via a tie-break on time to secure 4th position, the Frenchman maintaining his championship ranking in the process thanks to a consistent performance in Strasbourg. But he was unfortunate to land alongside Adam Raga and Toni in heat 2, the top 3 in the world meeting with only 1 place in the final up for grabs. And it was Adam Raga who missed out by just a single mark, a failure in section 1 coming back to haunt him when Toni managed to clean in the same section. Bo secured top seeding position from heat 2 with a single mark score in section 5 and then proceeded to dominate the final in a head-to-head with Mikel Gelabert. The youngster had squeezed through on countback in the heats to secure his first ever podium finish, but failed to get through any of the sections in the final. With series leader Bo completing each of the first 3 sections, the X-Trial was decided in his favour with 3 rides to spare. With Adam Raga failing to make the final for a second time and restricted to 3rd, Toni extended his championship lead to 26 points with a 55th career victory. Meanwhile, Mikel Gelabert was the main mover in the championship standings in Strasbourg, overhauling Jaime Busto and James Dable to move 4th and to within touching distance of Benoit Bincaz in 3rd. Hello everyone and welcome to my house. Today I'll be showing you my final preparations for X-Trial Barcelona and how we're spending the day. I'm very happy with how the season is going so far because I'm riding well, working hard every day and preparing to be at 100%. And the truth is that I'm really pleased with my performances. It's always difficult because all of my rivals are very strong, especially Toni obviously, who's always at a very high level. My aim is to beat him race by race. That's challenging to do because he makes it tough for us, but that's the aim. In the last race I only missed out on beating him by a single mark, and that's the way to beat him, because if you let him build a big advantage, it makes things much tougher. This is the section where I train and prepare for the X-Trials. To compete at the highest level in X-Trial, you have to be on top form at a very high standard of precision. It's a format that requires a lot of endurance. It's become more about stamina than solely performance, and there are very few days to rest between races. X-Trial Barcelona is very special because it was the first race I won. It's a very important event for all of the riders because it's our home race. And it's incredible for us because we've lived it from the stands as a spectator and then moved over to the other side of the show as a rider. It's impressive. If you could choose just one to win, it would be X-Trial Barcelona. X-Trial Barcelona is the longest standing event on the calendar and the original home of the discipline, the scene of the first indoor trial back in 1987. The event joined the World Championship upon its formation in 1993 and has since been staged in the Palau Sant Jordi, where a 9,000-strong crowd has packed in for the 41st edition. With Takehisa Fujinami rejoining the lineup as the nominated international rider, each of the top 8 in the 2018 X-Trial World Championship competes in Barcelona, joined by local rider Arnau Ferrer for the second appearance of his career. For the third X-Trial in succession, Gironi Fajardo led out the starters as the promoter's wildcard nomination, having failed to make automatic qualification in Strasbourg. But his chances in Barcelona looked far stronger after a promising round 1 outing in which he managed 3 clean sections, failed just 1, and kept his total score in single digits. Arnau Ferrer's appearance proved the level of difficulty in the sections that Fajardo had just faced. The second rider outthrew them, notching failures in Section 2 and Section 3 before withdrawing through a knee injury and therefore finishing bottom of the pile. Takehisa Fujinami made his return to the series in Barcelona after missing out in Strasbourg, and he, like Fajardo, had a promising start to the lap. The Japanese veteran dropped just 4 marks from the first 4 sections, but failed 2 of the remaining 3. To guarantee his place in round 2, Mikel Gelabert now needed to score better than Fajardo's 8-mark score, but instead he was left waiting on the performances of the remaining competitors after dropping behind Takehisa Fujinami in the standings. His 3-mark score in Section 1, the worst of anyone, proved critical for the Spaniards. Only one of the 6 riders who made it through from round 1 failed Section 3, which proved crucial in deciding who progressed. A failure there for James Dable left him needing a strong finish to the lap, but 6 dropped marks in the closing 2 sections dropped him behind Gelabert, eventually to elimination in 8th position. Jaime Busto secured his qualification position to the second round of heats for the 4th time in 2018, impressively becoming the first rider through Section 4, but dropping points in the remaining 2 sections affected his seeding position to round 2. Benoit Bincaz now had a clear target of 16 marks to beat to progress, and he matched that with a crucial clean in Section 5, gaining in a tiebreak on time to eliminate Mikel Gelabert and seize the last qualification position. Having missed out on the final on 2 occasions in 2018, partially as a result of poor seeding position from the opening round, Adam Raga was keen to challenge for the top positions in Heat 3, becoming the first rider clean through Section 4, and the first rider through the lap without failing any of the sections, eventually gave him top spot. Toni was in a strong position in the first half of the lap and recorded 1 clean more than his main rival, but a failure in Section 5 was enough to drop him behind Raga and his first round 1 defeat of the campaign. For the 3rd round in succession, James Dable is the only permanent rider to suffer elimination in the opening phase. Home representatives Mikel Gelabert unfortunate to be knocked out on time, and Arnau Ferrer ruled out through injury. So Toni lines up in Heat 1 for the first time this season. Lining up alongside him, Benoit Bincaz and Gironi Fajardo. Heat number 2 featuring Takehisa Fujinami, Jaime Busto and Adam Raga. Remember, just the winner of each heat will progress through to tonight's head-to-head grand final. As always, the riders have 6 minutes to complete 6 sections consecutively. First rider up, Benoit Bincaz representing Scorpa. Immediately landing on the sub, slipping back onto it once again. And 3 marks taken right on the first step, so any further errors here for Benoit Bincaz, and it'll be a failure right up in section number 1. Building up to the second main step of this section now. Assistant watching on from the top. Bincaz on his way up. He's had to take a dab, and that's a 5 in section 1. So a frustrating start for the Frenchman, using up 3 marks on observation on the opening step, and that proved a dear cost to him as he took another for a dab and down to a 5-mark score. Gives him more time for the remaining 5 sections though, as he moves straight into section number 2. Benoit Bincaz, the 21-year-old from southeast France, taking part in an X-Trial World Championship round outside of his home country for the first time. Of course, the previous 4 rounds of his debut season taking place in his homeland. Bincaz taking his time over the opening elements here in section number 2. Impressive podium finisher in Toulouse. Just drops a mark there for leaning on the landing. The only Frenchman to make it into the top 3 since way back in 2001. 1 mark taken on this section so far, and another decent-sized step to come here. Down into the trough, the back wheel will go, and then firing up towards the top. Watched on, as you can see, by the other riders, yet to tackle the sections here in round number 2. Nicely done there from Bincaz without taking a mark for leaning, but he has dropped one there on the landing and through to a 2-mark score in section number 2. Of course, Bincaz has no idea at the moment as to what type of score might be needed for him to progress through to tonight's grand final. He's just got to keep his scores as low as possible and hope that he can get the better of Gironi Fajardo and Toni Bo. Section number 3 on the rocks. Taking a dab there, left leg down, 1-mark score for footing. So that will move him on to 8 for this lap so far. Biggest step of the section next to come. Up into the gully in the middle of the largest rock of the section. Bincaz does make it up and does so nicely as well. Section number 3 going well enough for him at the moment. He's going to take 1 for leaning there on the landing and another 1 for leaning and then a footing, and it's a 5-mark score in section number 3. So accruing a series of marks for leaning there and then taking a dab in the section as well, and it's another 5-mark score, a second failure of the lap. Down goes Bincaz, having used the sump on the opening step, slipping back, front wheel right on the edges of the line there, and taking another couple of marks there at the top. This has become complicated, and a 5-mark score in the end for Benoit Bincaz, given by the section observer. So he's out of 3 of the first 4 sections with a 5-mark score. Now on to section 5. And slips off the side of that section as well. Turning into a disastrous lap, this one for Benoit Bincaz, who lines up for section number 6 with 22 marks already to his name. Into the grandstand for the stadium section, section number 6. Looking to keep his scores as low as possible here. In a decent position in terms of time after his early failures in several of the sections. Gives him enough time to think carefully about his remaining steps and avoiding any missteps in the remainder of this one, section number 6. The last of the modules here for Benoit Bincaz. Must make it over the left-hand side and then across towards the finishing line at the end of the last module. Right up into the stands here, watched on eagerly by the crowd. Going to take a mark for leaning there, Benoit Bincaz. And 1 step still to make across. This is going to be a challenge, and he's chosen to do it with a dab. So now on to 2 marks for this section. Right leg, though, he's used to lift the front wheel up, and this should be him through the section now. Indeed it is. So Benoit Bincaz makes it out of 2 of the 6 sections on this heat number 1. And it's a total of a 24-mark score for Benoit Bincaz. A challenging start to the lap for him. Right from the opening section, a failure in the early stages, and then several marks accrued for leaning in section 4 cost him there, and a couple of big falls in sections 3 and 5. So we move on to the second rider out in this one, heat number 1, with a 24-mark target total to beat. Gironi Fajardo into the sections now. Mark dropped on leaning right at the start of section number 1. As I said, Benoit Bincaz's biggest trouble there in his first outing was dropping a series of marks for leaning. Fajardo there moving on to 3 on the top step, so any further errors in the remainder of this section would see him fail, just as Benoit Bincaz did in this section number 1. And it's those sump stop marks that are proving critical so far in heat number 1. Benoit Bincaz with a 5 in this section 1. Gironi Fajardo looking to better Bincaz's lap total, and he's certainly got the better of his score there in section number 1. 3-mark score for Gironi Fajardo. Benoit Bincaz failed in the same section. Solid start for Gironi Fajardo there. The reigning world number 3, just 7th at the moment in the championship standings. The worst start to an X-Trial campaign in the last decade for him. He's going to pick up 3 marks there because he took 1 for leaning and then 2 separate dabs. So any further errors here for Gironi Fajardo and it'll be a fail. Bincaz only dropped 2 marks on this section. Fajardo just misjudging the step there, launched himself too far forward, slipped over, and he's taken a couple of extra marks there. Watched on by his minder. He's on to 3. And it's another dab at the top of the step, and it's a 5-mark score for Gironi Fajardo. A failure in section number 2. Bincaz got through that one quite nicely, so Fajardo moves on to 8 from the first 2. Bincaz at this stage was on 7. Gironi Fajardo then with work to do on the remainder of this lap as he comes into section 3. This one was failed by Bincaz after accumulating marks for leaning throughout the section and never making it to the final step. Bincaz actually dropped a mark on that rock, if you remember correctly, and Fajardo has avoided doing so, so that puts him in a decent position here. Got to make it up this main step. System waiting at the top. Nicely done from Gironi Fajardo, and without costing himself a mark on leaning in this section so far, although, courtesy of the commentator, he's taken 1 there for leaning. And that's another one there. So Gironi Fajardo making his way efficiently through this section 3. But it is going to be a 3-mark score in the end, in the 3rd section of the lap for Gironi Fajardo. He moves on to an 11-mark total at the halfway stage in round number 2. 24 is the target total to beat. Moving in now to section 4, Fajardo will be guaranteed a place above Benoit Bincaz and therefore inside the provisional podium positions if he can complete 2 of these remaining 3 sections. Such were his efforts in section number 3. First rider to get through sections 1 and 3, Gironi Fajardo. Now deep into section number 4. Challenging step, this one. Fajardo's made it up on the sump, but then drops backwards and falls backwards, and down goes the machine with a heavy thud as well. And that might require Gironi Fajardo to nip back to the paddock for a change of machine, because, as I said, that was a quite heavy fall, and away he disappears. And indeed, so it proves. Gironi Fajardo then is going to swap over onto the spare, back out onto the arena floor, time ticking away, and he has 2 sections still remaining on this lap. The good news for him is that Benoit Bincaz failed both sections 4 and 5. So as Gironi Fajardo now moves into section 5, he is on a 16-mark total. Benoit Bincaz failed this one, as I said, section number 5. Fajardo struggling right on the entrance to the section and drops out of it and out of the course and on with the action. So Fajardo didn't look too keen, quite honestly, to tackle that one, section 5, and that gives him more time to have a good go at section 6. But it puts him under a great deal of pressure. He must now complete this section. A failure here in this one would spell elimination for him. Gironi Fajardo, big moments in his X-Trial. 3 failures in the last 4 sections. He's got to make it through here. He's on a 21-mark total. Benoit Bincaz finished on 24. Not too much room for manoeuvre for Gironi Fajardo. Less than 20 seconds on the clock. But Fajardo makes it through and does so clean in section 6 to get the better of Benoit Bincaz and dump the Frenchman out of the competition at the X-Trial Barcelona here tonight. Good lap from Gironi Fajardo, a little bit inconsistent. Failure in section 4 particularly frustrating for him. Failure in section 5 was a soft one, but 3 of the 6 sections completed successfully, and Gironi Fajardo moves in to a provisional podium position. Winner of each of the opening 4 rounds this season, Toni lines up in section 1, the 3rd rider out here in heat number 1, and he's made it up over the opening step without even conceding a mark on leaning. Both Bincaz and Fajardo struggled over that step. No such difficulties for Toni, who leaps to the top of the 2nd step and already making section number 1 look very easy indeed. Toni making his 80th X-Trial appearance and his 11th here at X-Trial Barcelona tonight. making his way through section 1, watched on by Adam Raga, his main rival in the series standings. Bo is through section 1 clean. Binkaz had dropped a 5-mark score and Fajardo 3, so Bo already looking in a strong position compared to his 2 direct rivals in this one, heat number 2. And if he manages a second consecutive clean here, he'll be assured of his place in the final with 4 sections to spare. Jeroni Fajardo failed this one, section number 2, but Benoit Binkaz proved it is indeed possible. Toni Bo yet to suffer a defeat in the new era of the X-Trial World Championship. Nicely through the opening stages of this section without taking any marks on leaning. This, if anywhere, is where he'll drop a mark. Assistant standing at the top of the section. Bo will want to do it on the back wheel, and does so! Super stuff from Toni Bo. Continuing on in his heat number 1 appearance, Toni Bo is clean in section 2, and with 4 sections to spare, Toni Bo has already booked his place in tonight's grand final. Elegance, precision, a perfect effort there in section 2. Well, with just a single dropped mark in the first 4 sections, Toni Bo has been dominant in heat number 1. Moving on now to section number 5. Nobody has made it through this one as yet, and Toni Bo can't do so either. Down he goes to a 5-mark score. And that could make things a little bit more interesting in terms of top seeding position for tonight's grand final, because on the evidence of what we'd seen in the opening 4 sections, there was no way anyone was going to beat Toni Bo on this lap. He's now into section 6. Will that section 5 result have affected his rhythm, or can he bounce straight back here? 6 marks from 5 sections, already safely through. But as he doesn't have the favourable last starting position, he's not going to know exactly what he needs to do to have the advantageous last starting position in the final. Doesn't seem to bother him too much though. He's asking for the support of the crowd in the remainder of this section. He's got plenty of time left after that unexpected early 5-mark score in section number 5. The crowd urging him forward. Bo's going to try it on the back wheel. He has to take a dab to help himself, but he's through in section number 6. A 7-mark total on the lap. Impeccable. Difference of 14 marks to his nearest rival in heat number 1. 3 successive cleans to open the lap. Just 7 marks taken in the closing 3. He might be a little bit frustrated about section 5, but apart from that, it was near perfection from Toni Bo. Here it is again, Bo's section 5 failure. Just misjudging it slightly on the back wheel, attempting not to cost himself a mark on leaning, but it mattered little in the end. He progresses directly through to tonight's grand final. Jeroni Fajardo still occupying a provisional podium place, but he and Benoit Binkaz eliminated from tonight's X-Trial Barcelona. Now moving on to heat number 2, Takehisa Fujinami versus Jaime Busto and Adam Raga, with only the top performer in this one moving through to tonight's grand final to join Toni Bo. Also watching out to see whether anyone can beat Toni Bo's 7-mark total and deny him top seeding position through to tonight's grand final. Takehisa Fujinami then into section number 1. The opening step has challenged all of the riders so far, other than Bo, honestly, who made it look too easy with a clean in this section number 1. Can Fujinami match his Repsol Montesa Honda teammate? Up he goes, and down he comes. A 5-mark score, and he's absolutely shattered the rear mudguard. It's snapped in half there, and Takehisa Fujinami will surely have to head back towards the paddock to exchange and swap over to his spare machine. Disappointing start for the 38-year-old Japanese rider with a fiasco in section number 1, and that's going to leave him with work to do in the remainder of this lap. Of course, he doesn't know what his rivals Jaime Busto and Adam Raga are going to do as yet, but he has got that 21-mark total of Jeroni Fajardo to target to take a provisional podium position. Great to see Fujinami straight back into the sections, because actually it looked as though his head took quite a hard knock from the front wheel as the bike came down. None the worse for wear by the looks of things. Takehisa Fujinami emerges now into section number 2. This one also cleaned by Toni Bo. But as I said, it's Takehisa Fujinami here, effectively on his own. The first rider out in heat number 2. The oldest rider in the field tonight in his 134th X-Trial appearance. Main step of the section still to come for Fujigas. Up he goes, teetering on the brink for a moment there, but he's made it. Much to the delight of the crowd, who always enjoy seeing Takehisa Fujinami here in Barcelona. He's an adopted local rider, effectively, Fujinami, and he's going to make it through section 2. 2 marks dropped on observation. That moves him on to 7 from the 2 completed sections. Fajardo was on 8 at the same stage, remember, thinking in terms of the provisional podium positions. Fujinami's had to dash back again to the paddock to make another machine swap, but now he is back into the section. Section number 3. The rock section. We've seen Toni clean this one. Takehisa Fujinami trying to rush through in the early stages of this section by the looks of it, but he's looking good on observation so far. Builds himself up for the main step. Up he goes. Nicely done on the back wheel. He has taken him up for leaning. A little bit too far over to the right compared to where he wanted to be. Section observer watching on closely as he drops another mark for leaning. And that is a failure for Takehisa Fujinami. On his way down, he conceded 2 on leaning and then took another dab, and 4 errors is a failure. A fiasco there in the rocks for Takehisa Fujinami. Moves on to 12 from 3. Now into section number 4, and now out of section 4. Straight down to a fall, right in the opening to the section. This is not turning into a good lap for Takehisa Fujinami. 17 from 4. Now into section 5. And down once again, right on the opening to the section. Well, Fujinami cost himself a lot of time nipping back to the paddock after the opening 2 sections to change his machine, so he hasn't got a huge amount to play with in section number 6. And he must complete this section now with a maximum of 2 marks to remain above Benoit Bincaz in the overall standings. Certainly can't get the better of Gironi Fajardo. He's already behind him on 22. So the only way that Fujinami can now make it onto the podium is if Busto and Raga slip up. He currently sits effectively 4th in the overall standings here tonight. But Benoit Bincaz with that 24 mark total puts Fujinami under pressure here in section 6. He's on his way up quite nicely, Fujinami. Round of applause from the crowd as he makes it out of the skips at the bottom and onto the modules at the top. Still good in section 6 so far. Will Fujinami be able to offer his first clean of the lap? He's made it through only 1 section in 5 so far. He takes a series of dabs as he flies through the closing modules of the lap, and it's a 3-mark score in section number 6. So Takehisa Fujinami makes it out of only 2 of the 6 sections, a 25-mark total, and that will drop him behind both Gironi Fajardo and Benoit Bincaz in the provisional standings. Only an absolute disaster now from Busto and Raga could see him through. A nasty couple of crashes for Fujinami on that round 2 lap for him. After successive failures in the opening 3 sections, Jaime Busto now has only 10 marks to play with to avoid elimination from this one, heat number 2. Nice work on the opening step of section 4 for Busto. This one completed by only Toni so far. We've had 3 failures out of the first 4 riders to tackle this one, but Busto can hardly afford another, having failed the first 3 in succession. His assistant watching on from the top. This is the main step. Busto's done well. He's got up with a foot and a mark for leaning. In fact, it's going to be 2 marks for leaning that he takes there, according to the section observer. That moves him on to 3. Any further drop marks in this section, he'll become the 4th rider down to a failure. But he's made it over the toughest step. And Busto is through in section 4. Great work there from Jaime Busto, who occasionally shows such moments of promise. Former podium finisher, of course, in this 2018 campaign. And he's put in some great work there in section number 4. Now into section 5. A fiasco here would leave Busto behind Gironi Fajardo in the standings, guarantee Fajardo a place on the podium, and leave Busto hoping for Adam Raga to slip up. So Busto desperate to get through this one, but he's not going to. Straight off the side of it, lands heavily on the sump onto a curved surface and just slides off the back of it and down to a 5-mark score. Much to his disappointment, that's 4 failures in the first 5 now for Jaime Busto. Who moves on to section number 6. Now he can afford a maximum of 1 mark to remain ahead of Benoit Bincaz in the overall standings. 3 marks or more would drop him to the bottom of the standings and rule him out altogether. Remember, his direct head-to-head rival in Heat 2 is Takehisa Fujinami, who finished on 25. So Busto can afford a maximum of 2 marks to match Fujinami here. Fujinami scored 3 marks in the same section, remember. Jaime Busto, it's these final modules that cost Fujinami his 3 marks. What can Busto do here? Bo, remember, scored a single mark. Fajardo is clean on this one. Busto lands it on the sump on the penultimate module, and that's going to cost him in terms of leaning. He turns across to the side. And now's been given a 2nd mark on observation. So it's 2 for Jaime Busto here, but he's good in terms of time, and Jaime Busto makes it out, finishing behind Benoit Bincaz in the overalls, tying with Takehisa Fujinami, but so many successive failures at the start of the lap mean that he was much better in terms of time compared to the Japanese rider, and he will beat Fujigas on countback. But what a disastrous start to the lap it was for Jaime Busto that sees him eliminated. Straight on with Adam Raga as he lines up now in section number 1. 25 marks is all that he needs to beat. He's going to take a mark for leaning there, right on the opening to section 1. Better than a lot of riders have managed, with Fujinami and Busto both going down to a 5, remember, in this same heat number 2. Better than 25 marks, and it'll be enough for Adam Raga to secure his place in the grand final alongside Toni Bo. He's also got a side battle to try and match Toni Bo's 7-mark score and defeat him as he did in round 1 of the heats here tonight. Raga is through in section 1, just a single mark score there. And that means that if Adam Raga completes section number 2, he will already be guaranteed his place in the final. Such has been the high-scoring nature of this X-Trial here tonight. Certainly for the lesser lights. We've seen Toni Bo manage the lap on 7, but Fujinami and Busto, first out in Heat 2, 25 apiece. Adam Raga with just 1 in section 1, which Fujinami and Busto both failed. Raga with the opportunity to book his place in the grand final here. Clean so far, watched on by Toni Bo, who was also clean in this one, section number 2. Raga is up to the top and does so on the back wheel without conceding himself a mark on leaning. And it's looking good for Adam Raga to make it out of section number 2. The 4-times world champion does so and books his place in tonight's grand final. It's going to be the perennial rivalry resumed, Bo versus Raga, as Adam Raga is watched on by a disconsolate-looking pair of former teammates Takehisa Fujinami and Jaime Busto. Raga dropping a mark early in the rocks here, section 3, as he targets the 7-mark score set by Toni Bo. Bo failed section 5, remember, that's where Raga will be hoping to make the difference, but he needs to keep it close in the opening sections here. Runner-up in each of the last 5 X-Trials to have taken place here in the Palau Sant Jordi. Adam Raga is guaranteed another top 2 finish here tonight, but will it be the top step of the podium? Nicely done, up the section's main step, moving himself to the side of the gully, through the middle of that rock, down the other side. Beautifully done to avoid taking too many marks on leaning here. Again, Toni Bo watching on carefully to see what his main rival and grand final contender can do in that one. It's a 3-mark score. Marks dropped on leaning there by Adam Raga, who now sits on 4 from 3. Halfway through the lap, Bo was clean, Raga's on 4. Still far better than anyone else other than Toni Bo. But he comes into section 4 and can't afford a failure here if he wants to remain in contention for the top seeding position to tonight's grand final. 3 riders have already failed this section. Jaime Busto, last time out, managed to get through it with a 3-mark score. What can Adam Raga do? Section number 4, main step. And that was a strategic dab there from Adam Raga. He made the decision to put it up with his left foot and haul the bike up to the top of the section. And he's made it look fairly easy there, actually, in section 4. That was a far more comfortable ride for Adam Raga than it has been in that section for, I would say, anyone else. 5 marks with 2 sections remaining to try and get the better of Toni Bo's 7-mark score. So he's got to get through each of the remaining 2, which is going to be tough, particularly in terms of time. 6 minutes to complete 6. Bo had the advantage in that sense, as Raga drops a single mark. That moves him now onto a 6-mark tally, so any more drop marks, and Toni Bo will take the top seeding position, the advantageous second starting position for tonight's grand final. Assistant standing precariously on the side of the section at its highest point. Raga makes it through, but it's 2 marks dropped in section 5, and it will be Toni Bo who starts last in the grand final. Adam Raga will be first out, and then Toni Bo is your starting order for the deciding head-to-head stage here this evening. This one is all for glory and pride then for Adam Raga, but I would suggest it's going to be very tough on time for him to get through this one, section 6. He's the only rider to have made it through each of the opening 5 sections here tonight. Let's see if he can make it 6 out of 6. Adam Raga rushing through the final elements of the section and goes down to a 5. Well, he had to really push in the closing stages because he was very close on time. He only had 5 seconds left by the time he failed it. So it was a do-or-die leap at the end of that section number 6, and he couldn't quite pull it off there, Adam Raga. He finishes on a 12-mark score. Some excellent efforts, though. A clean in section 2. The first and only rider to get through section 5. A 12-mark lap for Adam Raga sees him through to tonight's grand final at the expense of Jaime Busto and Takehisa Fujinami. It's Fajardo in 3rd, Bincas in 4th, then Busto and Fujinami rounding out the finishers and the eliminated riders in round number 2. So Adam Raga will be first out through the sections in tonight's grand final. The disadvantage of that mitigated somewhat by the fact that only one of these 6 sections is completely new for the grand final. 2 of them, including section number 1, completed in both directions, the round 1 and round 2 directions. And then later on, sections 5 and 6 repeats of round 2 sections. Straight into section 1 then. This is where things start to get a little bit tougher in terms of time. 1 minute to complete the section or it's a failure. Raga working his way through efficiently in the first direction. He dropped 1 mark in this section in the second direction, up over the main step. You're about to see it here in reverse direction. Raga is through the first half of this section still clean, but it's over this step in the opening rounds that Adam Raga conceded a single mark. We saw it earlier on. A single mark score in section 1 of round 2, and it's going to be a single mark in the same place in the grand final. Consistency at very least from Adam Raga. He knows he's been able to make it through this once already in round number 2. This time he's got much more in terms of time pressure. The clock is ticking down. Less than 10 seconds remaining. Raga makes it through. 5 seconds left on the clock in the end. It's just a single mark score in section 1 for Adam Raga, taken on the same step that saw him concede a single mark in round number 2. Let's see now what Toni Bo can do, because he was clean in both directions, in round 1 direction and in the round 2 direction as well. And he's got a single mark score to better on this section if he wants to remain ahead of Adam Raga, having finished as the top seed from the second round of heats here tonight. It's Toni Bo. First half of this section completed. He's laboured over it a little bit more. He's worse off in terms of time than Adam Raga was at the same stage. Big step. Raga cost himself a mark there. Bo is through it clean. That could be critical. Toni Bo has the early advantage in section number 1, but he's still got to make it through in terms of time. He's going to need to rush these final elements. As I said, he's about 5 seconds down on where Raga was. He does rush through in the end, and it's 58 seconds just about. Toni Bo is through, and Toni Bo is through clean. Fine style from the reigning world champion. So a single mark separates the competitors after 1 section and with 5 to go. Section 2 with a slight modification in the early stages compared to round 2. Raga makes it over that, but he's conceded a single mark for leaning at the end of those spindles. So a single mark dropped in section number 1. Another single mark dropped so far in section 2. Raga has already once made it over this step and through this section clean, but the new element added to raise the difficulty level in the final has cost Adam Raga a single mark. 2 the total so far for Adam Raga. who works his way through, and at the end of section 2 is on 2 marks from 2. Toni Bo leads by a 2-mark margin, but still has to make his way through section 2. Does have the advantage of having seen Adam Raga working through this modified opening element of the section, and Bo does it nicely on the back wheel. So Bo is through clean on the element that cost Adam Raga his single mark. The crowd chanting Toni Bo's name. They've decided who they want to win here tonight by the looks of things. And it's Toni Bo who works his way through section 2 to consolidate that 2-mark lead. It's narrow stuff between the big guns so far here tonight. Nothing to choose between them in round number 1, just a 5-mark difference in round 2, and 2 marks between them in the grand final after 2 sections and with 4 remaining. On to section 3. This is the first of the new sections for the grand final. Adam Raga is working his way through. This is a mighty big step. The assistant climbing his way to the top, but Adam Raga can't do so on the machine, and down he goes to a 5-mark score. Moving on to 7 for the lap so far. And that means that whatever happens in this section 3, Toni Bo will still be the leader at the halfway mark in this grand final. Toni Bo, rider with the best record of anyone in what is his home event, has suffered just 1 defeat in 11 appearances here in the Palau Sant Jordi. Looking for an 11th X-Trial Barcelona win, could take a major step towards it if he can make it up this step. Adam Raga failed here. Toni Bo is up. He's had to use a mark for leaning, but he's up. And Toni Bo looking good now in section number 3. The hardest elements of the section arguably completed. This is about technical ability in the closing stages of it now. All on the back wheel from Toni Bo. Beautiful stuff in section 3 to consolidate now a 6-mark lead, and the fist pump confirms that Toni Bo knows the magnitude of that moment. One of the toughest sections of the final. Raga's failed it, and Toni Bo, the master of the big steps, has made it through. 6 marks the gap now between the 2 of them. As Adam Raga moves on to section 4. This one completed in both the round 1 and round 2 direction. Raga dropped a single mark in each direction through. This step having proved a challenge for all of the riders earlier on here in the night. Raga taking a slightly different approach this time. Rather than using a dab with his left foot, he's used a mark for stopping on the sump instead. But it's still going to be a single on observation for Adam Raga in the first direction. Halfway through this section number 4 then, Adam Raga. Looking good in the secondary direction. Decent step here. And he's taken a mark there for leaning. That must have been the merest of glances, but you could hear it. And Adam Raga is going to take 2 marks here in section number 4. He moves on to 9. It's been a good effort so far from Adam Raga, but he's got to rely on Toni Bo making a slip up now in the remainder of tonight's event. It's been an impeccable performance from Toni Bo almost all night. Just a single failed section in the second round. And Adam Raga probably needs Toni Bo to fail one of the remaining sections here tonight. 11 successive victories for Toni Bo, stretched back to Barcelona in 2016. That's how long Toni Bo has been unbeatable. And hoping to extend that in front of his home crowd here tonight. Adam Raga dropped a mark here. Toni Bo has to do the same. He was precarious for a moment there with either wheel dangling off the side of the section, but he's managed to get it back in line. And a single mark score in the first direction. He dropped a mark in the same place in the earlier rounds. Now he's got to make it through in the round 1 direction, which he did clean earlier on here tonight. And looks set to do clean again here in the final. So it's a single mark score accrued so far in section 4. Toni Bo has a 7-mark lead with 2 sections remaining. And the pressure will now be on Adam Raga in section 5. He must complete this section or Toni Bo will be confirmed the victor. So it's the first match point effectively here for Toni Bo. Adam Raga, desperate to make it through here in section 5. He did so in round number 2 with a 2-mark score. And he'll be hoping to better that this time around to really put the pressure on Bo in the closing stages. 7 marks the gap between them at the moment, and Raga's done that beautifully on the curved surface without dropping any marks for leaning. So Raga looking good at the moment in this one, section number 5. Time ticking away, but he looks good in that regard. And Toni Bo is going to have to wait at least one section longer to confirm himself as the victor here tonight. 7 marks is still the gap between them, with Bo yet to tackle section number 5. But Toni Bo can secure this X-Trial if he notches a maximum of a single mark score here. Beautiful on the back wheel. He has taken a single mark on leaning though, Bo. Powering through. Probably rushed that a little bit more than he needed to. He keeps it calm in the closing stages, keeps his composure. Final step for Toni Bo. And Toni Bo takes a 5th X-Trial win of the 2018 campaign to maintain his unbeaten run in the new era and deny Adam Raga once again. Raga will move into section number 6, already defeated. This one now is for show. And to make the victory margin as small as possible for Toni Bo as well. Raga failed this section in round number 2, but he was really pressed for time. He's got a whole minute to try and complete it this time around. The stadium section, section number 6. Really great to see the proximity of the crowd to the section itself as the riders fire up to the top of a waterfall of modules. Raga poised for the final steps and it makes it through clean. Nice work from Adam Raga, who finishes on a single mark total in the grand final. It's a 9-mark score for Adam Raga and the crowd really enjoyed that one. And now it's over to Toni Bo. 6 marks is the gap between the big two coming into this one. Bo cannot be defeated. Winner for an 11th time at X-Trial Barcelona. Took his first X-Trial Barcelona victory back in 2006 and has taken yet another in 2018, and what an incredible finish that is. Just 22 seconds to make it through section number 6. Bo doing it in style. He almost makes it out into the corridor in the bowels of the Palau Sant Jordi as he starts to celebrate yet another win. Adulation from the local crowd. They've seen the main man win here tonight. Yet another victory in 2018, and Bo may now be just one further victory away from the 2018 X-Trial World Championship title. Adam Raga, to his credit, never very far behind here tonight. Victor in the opening round, defeated by 5 marks in round 2 and 6 marks in the final, but comes up 5 points short in the championship standings after victory for Toni Bo. It's been tougher than it should have been for me to make this first podium, but finally I've improved my riding over the last couple of races, closer to my real level. Today I didn't think I'd really shone, especially on the second lap, but in general I felt good, and I think it's a well-deserved 3rd place. I was very happy to win round 1 and then finish 2nd in the final. I'm happy because I'm riding well, and now I hope to maintain this level for the coming races. I'm really happy to win here at home, a great night. Everything's working well in terms of the championship, even against rivals like Adam. I have to congratulate him because he put in an excellent ride on every lap and didn't let down his guard. I think the public have enjoyed it, and it's been a great show. Gironi Fajardo becomes the 7th different rider to make the podium in the 2018 X-Trial World Championship, and in the process moves from 7th to 4th, but remains 10 points behind Benoit Bincaz in 3rd. Meanwhile, Toni Bo celebrates a 12th successive victory, his 57th X-Trial win, and in the process opens a massive 31-point lead that gives him every chance of sealing a 12th world title next time out in Seville. Back-to-back events in Spain, starting in the sports Catalan heartland here in Barcelona tonight. so far in this one. And Toni makes it up. Execution Army opens step of section number 1 and straight down from remains clean, and now down to just 2 for our head-to-head grand final.